Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Senior Manager of Marketing Operations at Sam's Club, Christina Boyich. Over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, I'm Christine Boyich. I am on the marketing operations team at Sam's Club. Our marketing operations team supports the marketing team in various different ways, one of which is the management of our marketing tools. 2020 was obviously a very interesting year that presented a lot of challenges and new learnings for everybody. And for our marketing operations team, it was no different. The marketing operations team spent our 2020 working on our implementation of a new digital asset management system to house all of our marketing creative and more. Today, I'm going to walk through how we approached certain aspects of that implementation and walk you through some of the lessons that we learned and the things that we took away from that experience. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of that, I'll give you the lay of the land of where we started. So our current state for our digital asset management was a little clunky. It was a combination of using enterprise tools and our project management tool and other resources to house our assets and share and manage them. And this obviously presented quite a few challenges. The first biggest challenge was lack of metadata. We really didn't have any metadata available to customize. We didn't have a way to know what was expired, what was archived. There was really a huge miss in the metadata there. We also didn't have any search functionality, so you needed to know what you were looking for and where it was when you were looking for a certain asset to access it. We also had inefficient rights management. We didn't really have a way to track usage rights for assets. There may have been release forms in certain folders and things like that, but there really wasn't an organized way of knowing that an asset could or could not be used, and if that talent had passed its expiration, etc. There was a very disconnected user experience in our digital asset management process. If a user was to share their assets, they would have to leave the project management tool, go to the asset management tool, get a link or share that via email, then go back to the project management tool, share that link, and or confirm that they had emailed it. And it was very disconnected and very clunky. It also presented a lot of issues because we had difficulty sharing with external partners. So we work very closely with a lot of external agencies and vendor partners, and we do like to treat them as if they are part of our own team. And it was very difficult to do that with our enterprise tools. Because of the single sign-on capabilities and configuration, sometimes having outside partners and agency users access those tools was very difficult, and being able to access files that were shared with them was also very difficult. We didn't have any control over the expiration of assets. So if a month after our project, you wanted to go back and grab an asset to be able to reuse it for something else, there was a chance that it was going to be expired. There was no rhyme or reason to the expiration, and it was very unpredictable, and it made it very difficult to find what you were looking for. If it was expired, then you would have to hunt down who created it possibly and see if they had it on their hard drive and be able to share it. There also was a very big inaccessibility issue for people outside of marketing. If they wanted to find something to use in a presentation or for other purposes, they would have to track down someone in marketing, which often was a totally different person than needed to be contacted to help them track down who might be able to help them with the particular asset that they were looking for. And clearly that is not a very efficient use of anyone's time. So we took a look at these challenges, we listened to our users, and we decided that it was time for us to look for a proper DAM solution. So we began our journey in our implementation, and the first step was to find the DAM that was right for us. So in our system selection, our approach was first to identify the top criteria for the DAM, what we were looking for. And we did that by assessing those challenges, by using our own expertise, and also by working with various key stakeholders within the marketing organization to understand what that top criteria was for them and what they were looking for in a dam. We also were looking for a dam that would integrate with our tools. We heard loud and clear that that disconnection between our tools was a huge pain point. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever we went with would integrate with the tools that we were using. We also were looking for something that would integrate with other tools that served to our website and things like that. And lastly, once we had decided on a top contender, we needed to get our leadership buy-in. So we conducted a cost analysis and a key feature review to get that leadership buy-in. So we presented our leadership with, this is how much it's going to cost. This is exactly what we're going to get for that. And this is how that compares with what that top criteria is and what we're looking for. So what we learned through the system selection process was that working with the key stakeholders is absolutely crucial. As the marketing operations team, we have a lot of expertise in this area, but when we started working with the other teams, we learned that there was a lot of asset processes that we weren't aware of. And there was a lot of metadata needs that we also weren't aware of. So working with those key stakeholders and conducting interviews and trying to understand exactly what they're looking for really helped us get that top criteria and make sure that we're finding the best dam that was going to serve our end users and our members eventually. Secondly, we learned that integration to other tools was a significant support driver. That clunkiness, that disconnection between tools was such a huge pain point that when we started to narrow it down to tools, to dams that would integrate with our other tools, our end users that we were meeting with were really excited about the possibility that they would all be connected and that it would be a much, much more cohesive experience. And lastly, when we presented to our leadership, we learned that minimizing the cost without sacrificing that top criteria was essential for their buy-in. So we were able to find a dam solution that not only served the marketing team, but also served other areas of the SAM's business, therefore minimizing the costs without sacrificing the top criteria that we needed as a marketing team. So once we had gotten our leadership buy-in, we moved to our discovery phase. We got the green light and we hit the ground running. And the way that we approached our discovery phase was to work with representatives again within the marketing operations or marketing organization, to understand what all the requirements of the dam would be. So beyond that top criteria, the nitty gritty of what exactly needs to be in this dam. What metadata fields do we need? What is the folder hierarchy? How are we building this that's going to best serve our end users and ultimately our members? And throughout this process, as we were meeting with these representatives from different cross-functional areas in our business, we identified and developed some subject matter experts or some SMEs within the marketing team that would be with us throughout the entire project. We wanted to make sure that we could check in with them, show them our progress, get their feedback, and ultimately have them do testing and evangelizing to the other teams. We were really looking to develop experts, but to also develop cheerleaders that would go out into the rest of the marketing organization and would get people excited and get people into the tool. So what we learned throughout this discovery phase is training is very, very important. Providing training to the team representatives ahead of time could have really helped create a much better scope of requirements than we originally had to start with. When we had started those conversations, it was very much a conversation of, this is what I don't like about the current state, and this is what I like and what I don't like about the current state. And while that's well and good and it's very helpful and it's a great place to start, it sort of restricts the conversation. Had we had the training and they had known sort of what the dam would do and they had an understanding of what the possibilities were, I think it would have helped them provide a lot more of a directional input than just feedback on the current state and what they wish they had. Kind of along those same lines, technical training for the implementation leads on the SAM side would have also really helped the entire implementation. I think it would have really helped simplify the process and eliminate the scope creep. There was many times where, we had gotten our leadership approval and we had hit the ground running. So there was a little bit of a knowledge gap, and we were learning as we went along, and the implementation team was helping to explain things to us. But there was definitely a knowledge gap. And there were times where we're trying to solve for a problem and we hit a point where it was like, ooh, well, we didn't know that it worked this way. So now we have to start back at point A, and now we have to go down another path. And that obviously creates a lot of scope creep, and it slows the entire process down. So technical training ahead of time so that we sort of knew what our limitations were, and what the tool could do for us would have really, really helped. And lastly, our subject matter experts. Subject matter experts are very, very helpful. We learned that it's a great thing to be working with them and developing them, but it's crucial to make sure we have the right SMEs. For us, that meant SMEs that would poke holes in the process, that would poke holes in the configuration, that would be the squeaky wheel, that would challenge us to make sure we're looking at all the possible solutions for certain processes and certain issues. There are some people who are very adaptable and who would look at a solution and say, okay, well, that's not really how I was expecting to work, but it's okay, I guess we'll deal with it, as opposed to another user who would say, that's not how I was hoping that would work. Are there other options? What can we do? What about this? And is this something that we could explore? And that is the SME that I think really would have helped us had we had more of those from the beginning. So we got through our discovery phase and we were ready to move to the next phase, actually building our dam and getting going. And we moved into our configuration phase of our implementation. So we started with configuration by using what we had. So we used our current state as the base to influence how we were going to build this dam. We were going to use similar workflows, taxonomy, current state process, as well as some data elements from other tools, and some processes and workflows from other tools as well. We also used the same ideology for our current user setup. So as I mentioned, we work very closely with our external partners, our agency and vendor partners, and we very much treat them as they are a member of our own team. And that translates to user setup. So we needed to make sure that we were setting up our users so that we weren't going to have those access issues and things like that. So we used that really as a base for setting up our users in the dam. And lastly, once we got through our configuration and it came time for user acceptance testing, we used a more simplified UAT plan. So we tested a little bit, we tested our customization, but then we tested mostly with our SMEs the basic functionality of the tool. Again, there was that little bit of a knowledge gap. And so we were kind of just testing basic functionality, as opposed to using actual projects and how we would use it in real time. So what we learned throughout this configuration project is current state is a great place to start, but we needed to find the balance between duplication and total reinvention. When we were sort of focused on where things were at today, and this is how we do things today, we kind of got into a over customization rut where we were customizing a little bit for customization's sake. And so we learned that it's really important to find that balance and take what you have as the base, but then change it maybe a little bit and meet in that middle of what's going to ultimately be the best experience for the end user. We also learned that it's important to look at all possible options. We learned that you want to challenge your implementation team to provide you with multiple solutions to a problem. So our user setup issue, for example, we had a certain way that we needed things to be, and we were given a solution and we said, great, let's take it. And we didn't really look at what are the other possible options to know and feel good about the fact that we were making ultimately the best choice and the most cohesive, creating the most cohesive experience for our end user. And lastly, again, training. We learned that training could have really helped the UAT process. Had we known what those functionalities would be and had our SMEs understood better what those functionalities of the dam would be, I think they would have provided a lot more, more useful UAT testing experience. And I think we would have found a lot more issues, and we would have been able to solve for a lot more things and create a more robust best practices documentation ahead of time had we had that training. So once we were done with the UAT, we were all configured. We launched internally, and we had the tool ready to go. And then we moved forward with our implementation phase and go live plan, which is where we sit today. So our approach here was first to migrate all of the content from the current solution to the dam. So we have a digital asset manager on our marketing operations team who had met with our creative teams and our business leads to identify what was important to bring over from the current solution into the dam. And he migrated it in, associated it with metadata, and properly archived it within the tool and got it set up properly. And he has been doing the same since we had the tool live. He's been doing the same with all current projects. So even though we haven't launched the entire organization just yet, we have been putting in all of the new projects and making sure that all of the 2020 and 2021 content is in the dam when it goes live to the rest of the organization. We also finally provided training to our SMEs. So we participated in a formal training with the vendor to refresh them on the basic functionalities of the dam, to teach them some more complicated, complex functionalities of the dam, and to even demonstrate some aspirational functionalities as well that they might want to use down the line. And lastly, our rollout plan. Our rollout plan is to conduct a soft launch rollout first. So we have some small groups that have been working on specific projects and a lot of video projects and things like that within the dam before we go live to the entire organization, so that we can understand what that experience of those real life projects is before we roll it out to the rest of the group. So what we've learned through this implementation phase is migrating the content up ahead of time is definitely going to create a better user experience at launch. We've already seen with some of the groups from our soft launch rollout, seen them respond to this really well. They go into the dam and it looks and feels and operates exactly how it's supposed to, as opposed to saying, well, we just launched it, so it's going to look like this eventually. So that's been successful. We also learned that providing that formal training for our SMEs really increased the engagement. So it not only gives them the technical skills, but it also got them really excited about the tool. And they went back to their teams, and they even went outside of the marketing organization, were telling everyone about the dam and getting them really excited. So we ended up getting that cheerleader effect that we were looking for. And lastly, we've learned throughout this implementation plan that rolling out the dam to our smaller groups really helped us identify a lot of those issues that we may have missed in our UAT. So for example, we had tested file size. And large file size. And once we actually got in there and we got in with the real-time assets that we were using, we realized that we were unable to download certain assets of a certain size. And so we learned what the best practices for working around that and how to make sure that we can successfully download those assets. So rolling out to these smaller groups has really helped us build that best practices documentation and identify some other bugs and things that we could fix ahead of launching to the rest of the group. So we're still in the soft launch phase right now, and we are rolling out to our entire organization in just a couple of weeks. And I am really, really excited for that. It was definitely a super awesome experience working on this implementation. It was very unique, especially given that we were starting to work on it and moved to our 100% work from home environment. And we're working on this implementation in so many different areas from the comfort of our own living rooms, which posed its own challenges and its own learning. So it was definitely a great experience. There was a lot of things that we learned, but I will leave you with my 3 most important things that I learned from this experience. Number 1 is train, train, train. Training would have really helped us in an endless number of ways in this experience had we had the time and the resources to be able to train our subject matter experts and our implementation leads. I think it would have set us up for success and would have moved a little faster and a little more efficiently than we did. Second is to not over customize. If future Christine could go back to past Christine, she would tell her to don't let your current process lead you to over customization in your new DAM. Find that balance, find where you can meet in the middle to give your end user and ultimately the member, the consumer of your content, the best experience possible. And also to make sure that you're pushing yourself and your implementation team to explore all different kinds of options and make sure that you're making the best choices, that it's not always the first choice that's going to be the best. And lastly, one of the most important things I learned on this project and in my time at SAMS was it is so valuable to keep the end users engaged throughout the entire implementation process. We have other implementations that we've gone through where it didn't necessarily, we didn't necessarily involve them in that process so much. And there was definitely a disconnect and there was definitely a little bit of difficulty in adoption because of that. We've already seen, because we have had our end users so engaged from the get-go, we've already seen that people are really excited about it. We've already seen a lot more buy-in from our end users because they have that exposure and they have been involved since the beginning, and they feel like it's more about something that they've built. It's their tool. It's not necessarily something that we built and said, okay, here you go. So they're very, very excited about the DAM, and we are too, and we cannot wait to finish our go live and rolling out. So I'm very excited, and thank you so much for listening to our implementation journey today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Christine. I think we all need a future Christine to sit on our shoulders and, and help us. I love that. So we have a few minutes for questions, and there's been quite a few questions rolling in. If anybody has any other last minute questions, please do put them on there. So one of the questions was, you mentioned that integration was really important for generating support around the organization. And there's been a question about which integrations in particular generated the most buy-in, and when did you start when are you considering starting integrations?
Yeah, so we use a project management tool in our marketing organization. So all of our what we kind of refer to as our standard marketing campaigns that go through this marketing pipeline of approvals and then ultimately into creative development. For that entire end-to-end process, we use a project management tool. And that was definitely the tool that got the most feedback, and people were really excited because they live and die by that tool. They're in it all day long. All communication happens in there. And it's also very archival for every campaign that we do. So that one was definitely the most exciting. we sort of simultaneously, as we were implementing, we simultaneously went ahead and did that integration ahead of time. So at launch, it's already integrated and ready to go. And then I did mention this as well, but the tool that we chose, this isn't really an integration, but the tool sort of has two different sides to it. And one of those sides is that it serves marketing content to our samsclub.com website. So that was also another key integration. I'll use air quotes around that for support drive as well, just to have everything be very cohesive in one place.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's also been a question about how long does it take to do this sort of implementation? It sounds like it's pretty big.
I think it definitely depends. I think it depends on what exactly you're implementing, whether it's simple, more complex, how much customization you have. It did take us about a year for various different reasons. One of those is the integration that added a new sprint onto the project. We did have some things that we ran into where we realized we needed a customization, so we had to add another sprint on. So it took us over a year to do ours, but I think it's very different and totally depends on what you're trying to implement.
Yeah, I agree. And a year may sound like a long time, but actually when you're working in such a complex ecosystem, that's nothing, isn't it?
Oh no, it definitely has flown by.
And we've had another question about how did you go about creating the metadata schema? What was your approach and when did you start setting up the metadata?
So we started in discovery. So during our discovery phase, we used those team representatives and our subject matter experts to really influence building our schema. So we did a little research and decided what was sort of the basic things that we needed to include as a place to start. And then we asked them, what else would you want to know about an asset? We helped educate them that the metadata would influence archiving and that it would influence the search and filters and things like that. And I think that helped them understand what exactly they needed to provide. So we leaned really heavily on our marketing partners to help us understand what exactly they wanted to know about an asset. We especially leaned on our creative team and on our channel owners. So those marketing strategists that oversee specific media channels, who are ultimately kind of the last person with the baton in that marketing process, taking that piece of content and then delivering it to the member. So we leaned really heavily in those areas to use their expertise to build those schemas.
Brilliant. And we've had another question come in that says, how long would you suggest for a soft launch before a full go live?
Again, I think it really depends. And I think it depends on on kind of the full scope of your marketing team. We have definitely taken a few months. And I think it's been really helpful for us, but I don't know that I would take more than 3 months, because I think then you get into a little bit of a sort of delay phase and a little bit of the word I'm looking for, appearance of delay. And you get a little, if you're like me, you get a little obsessive about all the things that you're finding. Sometimes it's a little better to just rip the Band-Aid off and jump in with your go live.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. All right, well, I'm going to wrap us up there. Thank you so much, Christine. This has been really brilliant.